I was in a coma for 3 weeks, and when I came out of my coma, I saw my face and body for the first time, and I didn't recognize that person. So I didn't know who that person was. So there's one of my identities that have been taken away from me. The person I knew for 19 years, every time I looked in the mirror, is no longer there. He's gone. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was going to be. I didn't know anything. And where your focus goes, your energy follows. I'm never going to have a job. Like, I went into all these things, and guess where my energy went? Down the drain.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Talk2Rami show. Today is a special day because I'm sitting with my dear friend JR Martinez, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, good and bad, but he's the best New York seller, actor, and name it, public speaker, motivational speaker, coach, everything. But it's a very fascinating story, and we're going to talk about his story and what's going to happen in the future. But
that's the fun
JR,
part.
That's the fun. What's going to happen in the future? Because, you have a very, very fascinating story, my man. And I remember we met 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, and you were busy. You were middle of this transition and getting to public speaking, Dancing with Stars was, done. And where are you at now? Where is JR now?
Oh, man, that's a loaded question. I mean, I literally was thinking about it yesterday as I was driving, and I don't know what prompted this thought, because that's usually how my brain works, is just all of a sudden I see something, I hear something, I read something, and I just start thinking. And I just thought about in the last 5 years. I'm like, 5 years?
Fast.
Gosh, what has happened in 5 years? So much has happened in my life in 5 years. And even, go 6 years. What's happened in 6 years? 6 years ago, I moved to Austin. 6 years ago, all this stuff, had another kid and went back to school. Finished my degree, got my degree, started the podcast, paused that for a second, did virtuals during COVID. Started coaching my daughter in softball, and then started traveling again. And it was just like, I just had so much on my plate. There was so much on my plate, and I was overwhelmed. I mean, I loved everything that I was doing, but it was slowly getting to a point where it was preventing me from being able to show up in the way that I like to show up every single time that I get an opportunity to engage with somebody. And, and so life now has slowed down a little bit in the sense of where, I'm not coaching my daughter's softball team anymore, which is, for anybody that's ever coached a sport or kids sport, you understand how time consuming and energy consuming it is. But I'm in a really fun place in life right now where I got a little bit of time. I don't have the school thing on my plate. I don't have the podcast thing on my plate. I am speaking. I am traveling. I am doing that. But it's not to the point where it's, just overwhelming me, where I'm always on the road. So I got a lot of downtime, and I think that's what I need at this stage of my life, is to figure out what it is that I want to be when I grow up. Because I'm only 41. I mean, it's weird to say that. It's weird for me to hear the fact that I'm 41, because I don't feel 41. Now my body, of course, feels 41 or more, but mentally I don't. And so I'm excited about where I'm at right now.
Let me tell you, I read your book. It's a very, very fascinating story. The role of your mother and how you are in one way protective, one way criticizing, and one way you just want to get away and do what you want to do. For example, be a football player, which it didn't happen. Everything happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. But if you're going back there, when the coach told you that, hey, JR, you got to the team, mm-hmm. but not because you have the skills, but because you have the attitude.
Yeah.
Why did he say that? Really, what did he say? I was reading the book. I said, okay, he doesn't have the, techniques or skill, but he's got the attitude. Is that right that we hire people for attitude, or that's the reason people get in life, because of attitude, and that kind of motivate you. But at the same time, and then later on, it's just kind of stop you and change your life, and you sign up to the army because you just saw the all you can be and the TV ad.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and they said something that really resonated with me. And I haven't had time to really dive into it to really understand or who said it or who wrote it or whatever. But essentially what this person said was how your DNA could be changed by your environment. And after the conversation, I just marinated on it, and I've been marinating on it. This is like 2-3 months now that I've really been marinating on what that person said to me. And this person wasn't necessarily referring to like me. She was just more talking in general, and she just said how your DNA could be changed by your environment. And the more that I stop and I really think about that, and I think that's one of the reasons that I have been able to really dig and find some elements of my life and my story that are relative to other people, and have managed to have this longevity and sustainability in this career that I've had. I mean, I've been speaking for over 20 years, which is crazy to say because I'm only 41, but I started when I was 20. That's the blessing.
From the hospital.
That's the blessing in the sense of how I was injured so young. As much as you don't want any kid to go through what I went through, the blessing in that is that it did happen so young, and I was able to go through my really rough patch, but also have this revelation and awareness of this is what my life could be. And I was still 20 and 21 and 22 and 25. And so I can now apply all these things and now get out into the world and hopefully have this, impact in the world that I wanted to have. But I spend a lot of time pausing, is my point. Is I spend a lot of time in the midst of us being force fed this narrative that we have to grind and we have to hustle and we have to go. And that's sort of the thought process that our minds go to. I really try to pull something that I experienced on the 5th of April of 2003 overseas. And I know this is probably all over the place. That's the way my brain works. So bear with me for those of you watching. But the day that I was injured, for a very long time, I would just talk about how my body was changing. I would talk about what I was feeling. I would talk about those experiences, right? I would talk about all the details and a lot of the traumatic stuff that I was experiencing. And it's traumatic, of course. But over time and through a lot of therapy, and whether traditional therapy, untraditional therapy, a lot of learning what the word vulnerability actually feels like, not what it means, but what it feels like. I can know the definition of vulnerability, but do I know what it feels like?
It's totally two different things.
It's two different things, right? Because you can easily, it's no different than like, okay, I read all these books. Okay, all these books are going to give me, there's Ed Milet right there. All these books are going to give me knowledge. And people say knowledge is power. Okay, cool. I believe knowledge applied is power.
By execution.
Because then knowledge that you just retain, that's just cocktail talk at that point. You just want to sound, like a bunch of stuff when you're having a couple of drinks with some people that right? But when you apply it to certain things in your life, or you help other people apply it to theirs, that's power. Now you've taken a different step. And so what I like to focus on the day that I was injured was the 5 minutes that I was trapped inside of that Humvee, and I was getting to there's several instances where my eyes would get really heavy and they would close. And in the midst of my eyes being closed, I wouldn't feel any pain. I wouldn't hear any of the noise and any of the chaos. All I could hear was my own voice talking to myself. And I would tell myself, I would say, I can't believe I'm going to lose my life here. I can't believe I'm going to lose my life in this way. My mom's worst fear is becoming a reality. And then I could feel my breath. I could literally feel myself breathing. And then I would also think of my, this is the situation that I'm in. But it was just sort of peaceful. And then I would open my eyes, because then I would tell myself, don't keep your eyes closed, because if you keep your eyes closed, you're giving up, you're quitting. And I would open my eyes and I would continue to scream and yell, and I would start to feel pain again. And then my body would get weak, and then all of a sudden my eyes would close, and I would go back to just connecting with my breath and connecting with my thoughts. And to me, I think that's what I try to do. That's what I've pulled away from that experience. I don't focus on the traumatic stuff. I don't like that stuff is like, it doesn't serve me. So why am I going to sit here and focus on that narrative? For me, what are the fruits in that? What is the juice, the stuff from that experience, from that day that nearly took my life? What can I take from that? What can I extract from that? And what I've extracted is that. And what that serves is a reminder for me that in the midst of where, listen, I did the same thing when life got busy and opportunities where, I mean, as if you're a football fan, you follow this. Antonio Brown, who used to play for the Steelers, he said business is booming. And when business is booming, I was like, I'm busy, I'm grinding, I'm so busy. And then I realized like that's not what I want. That is not how I'm able to really show up as the person that I want to show up as. And I started to spend more time doing what I did on the 5th of April of 2003 in that Humvee, is just pausing when life felt overwhelming. When life felt chaotic, just close my eyes and just connect with my breath and just connect with my thoughts. And it's a simple practice. I mean, people talk about it's meditation. Okay, cool, meditation. It's not a traditional meditation. It's just me. And I do it anywhere, wherever I feel like, okay, something feels out of balance, something feels like out of alignment. You'll catch me. Like I'll sit on a plane. I'll get in my car. Before I stepped into your studio, I'm sitting in my car and I'm sitting there and I'm just closing my eyes and I'm just connecting with myself and I'm allowing myself the space to feel comfortable and to know that I'm going to come and have an honest conversation with you. No matter where this conversation goes, I'm preparing my body and my mind for that conversation, that it's okay. It's a safe space. I can be vulnerable. I can feel that. And if something feels uncomfortable, well, that means I'm being vulnerable. That tells me I need to do more of that because my body is telling me, hey, alarms are going off right now. I feel a pit in my stomach. I feel shortness of breath. I feel like something in my throat, a knot in my throat. The body, because the body remembers all the trauma. The body retains it all. It's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. The mind forgets, right? All the things you've been exposed to. The body remembers everything. And the body is always trying to alarm you, not remind you. It's an alarm because when something triggers you, all of a sudden, you start to panic, you start to have anxiety, you start to have all these different ways that people respond. But anyways, that's like a 14-minute point that I don't even know where it fits in. But to kind of go back to your original question, when this lady said that your DNA can be changed by your environment, it really resonated with me because in the midst of me pausing, I just thought about, wait a minute, okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Because when I was a kid, and you know this because you've read the book, when I was a kid, my mom was dating that man that would, took me to that bar.
Yes.
That and had me singing. He didn't force me to do it. I enjoyed it. Like Spanish was my first language. And so I would be at this bar, with all these people that have been heavily intoxicated. I'm sitting there talking about heartbreak and dancing and all this stuff. And I'm like 5 years old and I'm doing this and I love it. And it's fun. And he's back there playing the piano. And when I think about that, I'm like, that's who that's who I am. That's who I was born to be, is that kid, is that person, is that personality that is comfortable being in front of people, that loves being in front of people, that loves the engagement. That's who I was born to be. I'm an extrovert, but I'm also an introvert. Like I have my moments, right? But my environment and experiences try to change my DNA. Tried to take away that person that I was born to be. So the experiences that I had, with my mother, which I probably will get into, with me moving around a lot, me sort of the communities that I lived in that maybe weren't the best, that weren't the safest, all that was starting to kind of change and take away a little bit of the DNA of JR, who he was supposed to be. And I was going down another trajectory, down another road. But that part of me was still there. So when I moved to Georgia my senior year of high school and I tried to join the football team and that coach is saying, hey, man, unless you're a starter, like
you can't join. Yeah.
You can't join the team. Like we already got our team set. And I'm like, I get your policies. Just give me a chance to come out and try out. That's all I asked for him. And he said, okay. So I came out. I wasn't 100% because I just had a surgery on my ankle. And I didn't know anybody, nor did anybody know me. And so in the midst of like going through this tryout, there's guys, which I later learned, some of those guys were like the stars of the team, and they were gonna be the stars going into our senior year. I didn't know that, but I would see them go through a drill and they didn't do the best that they wanted to do, or they messed up or whatever, and they would just like start pouting, and their heads were down and all this other stuff. And I would just go up to them like, "Hey man, come on, you got this. Next play, boom, boom, boom." That's what I was doing. That I was this loud person at practice, just trying to uplift everybody. And that's when my coach afterwards, I was like, "There's no way I made this team. Like, I can't even run a full sprint. I can't even run a 40 because of my surgery. Like, I didn't make this team." And then when he said you made the team not because of your ability, but because of your attitude, honestly, 18 years old or 17 years old, I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't even care to find out what that meant. All I cared about was I was on a football team.
It was just your drive.
And I was going to be able to like be good with the honeys.
Yeah.
Like, I was going to be a football player. So that's all I cared about. That was, my mind was just like, all right, I made the team. I didn't care. And it didn't click until years later that attitude and how that has always been part of my foundation. And there's a lot of things that have, when you create a foundation, right, to build a house on, to build a big structure.
I'm all about the foundation.
Think about the foundation. Think about everything that they pour into it, everything that has to go together. It takes time.
You got to have a solid foundation.
Time. And it's not just one thing, one substance or another. It's multiple things that come together to essentially create this strong foundation, which is why when you see these natural disasters, like for example, homes being taken away by a tornado or by a hurricane or a tropical storm, the structure is ruined. Usually the foundation is still right there. It's still intact. It's still there. And so when people say, I'm going through what I'm going through, gosh, I'm starting over. You're not starting over. You're just, you have to build a new structure, but your foundation is there.
One of the things they say a lot, and I'm sure you agree with that because I read in your book, people are getting used to the phrase that, man, don't tell me, I'm dealing with a bunch of stuff right now. I agree with you. We are experiencing it. We experience different levels in our lives, not dealing with it.
Yeah.
Like you didn't deal with your injury. You went through it that day, and it was your time. Like you had to be a driver. Mm-hmm. He said, "Hey, JR, it's time for you to drive," and then you had the road bump.
Yeah.
And the whole thing changed, and you experienced differently. Mm-hmm. That's what they say now. You just deal with it. No, experience.
Yeah. It's and I think that's the key is like when people say, so and so is dealing with it. Or has I'm like, have they dealt with it? No, they just experienced it. Like dealing with it means you're actively doing something to try to deal with it. If you're just surviving, you're not dealing. You're just surviving, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the stage of life that you're in. I was dealing for a long time. Experiencing for a long time. I didn't deal with anything. It took me years to work through a lot of the resentment that I had towards the guys that were in my unit.
Why?
I had a tremendous amount of resentment. So, I joined and we were talking, right before we went on, but, I joined my unit in late January of 2003, and 7 weeks later, I was on a plane deploying with these group of guys.
That was a fast pace.
Absolutely. And I had no extensive training. I had nothing. I just came out of basic training. I didn't really have an opportunity to bond with these guys that were in this unit, right? Like a lot of them, I was one of the young guys in the unit. A lot of them had been in the military, the Army, at least 6, 7, 8 years, had deployments under their belt, not to any war zone, but they've been deployed. They've been to other cultures.
The experience
they've had extensive training. They've had all that, right? And I didn't. And I just sort of leaned into the narrative of, man, I'm just going to follow these guys. These guys are going to guide me. These guys are going to teach me. I'm just going to follow them. And I experienced the type of leadership that was both good and bad. And that's true in any organization. I'm not sitting here and just essentially throwing the military under the bus. This exists.
It exists everywhere.
Any brand you work for, any organization you're a part of, it exists. So this is not anything brand new for anybody. But, I remember one of the guys in my unit, one day he had taken off his shirt And when he took his shirt off, he had a tattoo of the unit crest on his chest, the unit logo. And I asked him, I said, and I was legitimately curious. I said, why do you have that tattooed on your body? And he said, because this is a brotherhood. I love this. And I authentically, organically responded with, this isn't a brotherhood. I said, nobody cares. I was like, nobody cares. That's what I said, because that's how the culture made me feel that way, right? Because what led up to that, leading up to that point, that comment that I made, I remember sitting in the middle of the desert and getting briefings on strategy of war. And this is how we respond in this situation. This is what we do in this situation. This is how we do in this situation. And I had a lot of questions, man. I had a lot of questions because I was like, this makes no sense to me. But of course it wouldn't make any sense to me. I'm a kid. I just got out of high school. Like, think about it. 3 years prior, at 16, I got my license. 3 years later, I'm in another country being told that when we're driving, we're in convoys. And if people stand in front of our Humvees to try to stop us,
just go.
You keep driving.
Even you have to go over them.
3 years ago, I was told pedestrians have the right of way. Now, 3 years later, you're telling me that doesn't exist? Of course, I had a lot of questions. But the more questions I asked, the leader that was at the front of that room that was essentially going through all this just would never say, oh, Martinez, stop asking questions. Oh, Martinez, you have too many questions. He never said it, but his body language said it. Every time I raised my hand, yes, Martinez. And all that did for a young 19-year-old in the back of the room was like, you know what, man, forget it. This guy doesn't care. He's just getting frustrated that I'm asking questions. So I'm not going to ask anymore. I don't even want to be here anymore. I can't wait for my deployment to be done. I can't wait for my 3-year term to be done. This isn't for me. I want to get out of here. And I just at that point, like any organization, I was just showing up and doing my job because it was my obligation. I didn't even care about it anymore. So when I said it to that guy in my unit that nobody cares, I felt that. I meant that. Well, my lieutenant overhears me. My lieutenant takes me outside in the middle of the desert. I mean, listen, we're in Austin right now, and it's like 120 degrees. I mean, it feels that way. It's like 108, 109.
It's different.
It's ridiculous, right? Think about, for those of you that are experiencing that type of heat, and think about somebody taking you outside and smoking you. And smoking you, that's a term in the military where they make you do every exercise that they can think of. And in some cases, they're briefing you while you're doing the exercise. In other cases, they're just watching you.
It's a sort of punishment.
It is. And the whole time I'm doing this, he's lecturing me on how we're a brotherhood, how we take care of one another, how we're bonded. We're always going to be there for one another, not just during a time of war, but forever. Well, whether I agreed with it or not, I was going to be like, yes, sir. I got it. You're right. Because I don't want to be in this heat anymore doing this stupid exercises you got me doing. So I was like, oh, my bad. So I went back in. I found the guy and I said, hey, man, I'm sorry for saying that. He said, it's all right, man. That was the end of it. But I still didn't feel like I didn't feel it. Yeah. I didn't feel it. Because, listen, leaders can say all sorts of things that they want. You got to feel that shit. It has to feel right. And fast forward maybe about a week or so, we get a briefing from another commander. Now, this commander had a very different way of commanding the stage. He looked out to everybody in the audience. He made eye contact. At least he made me feel like he made eye contact with me. He talked about the role that every single person played. He talked about the importance of every single person. He talked about service. He talked about purpose. He talked about all these things. So when I left that briefing, I was like, yo, it recalibrated my mind. That made me want to be in the military, not just for one deployment, not just for 3 years. I then started thinking, I want to do this for 20 years of my life. And so then I get injured, right? Now, I always tell people this. I was in a coma for 3 weeks. And when I came out of my coma, I saw my face and body for the first time, and I didn't recognize that person. So I didn't know who that person was. So there's one of my identities that have been taken away from me. That identity is taken away from me. The person I knew for 19 years, every time I looked in the mirror, is no longer there. He's gone. When I'm looking at that person, I do not have a relationship with that individual. So that identity is gone. I don't know who that person is. But also the identity was taken away from me of serving in the military because I was told that I couldn't stay in the military. I was injured. I was too banged up. We're going to medically discharge you, get you out, let you go on with your life and go do something else. 19 years old with these scars, with this body, with a lot of the limitations I had then, with no tools, no resources, no nothing, and you're going to throw me out into the world. Okay, cool. So now I lost another identity. So within a matter of a couple of days of coming out of this in coma, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was going to be. I didn't know anything. And where your focus goes, your energy follows. And my focus went to this narrative of like, I'm never going to be able to function amongst normal people. I'm never going to be able to be in the same space as normal people because they're going to look at me and say, oh, that guy. Right? Oh, get him away from us, right? They're going to avoid me. Kids are going to like look at me and scream and run away. I was that real life scary figure that's now coming to life. I focused on that I'm never going to meet anybody. I was 19. I'm never going to meet anybody. I'm never going to be able to have a family. I'm never going to have a job. Like I went into all these things. And guess where my energy went? Down the drain. I was this negative, horrible person to be around. I didn't speak to anybody. I didn't tell my mother I loved her every day when she left my room to go back to her room. I didn't say anything. I was like, my life is over. And I would tell everybody I would have been better off had they just left me in the Humvee to die. Because then I would die as a hero. I would die in combat and they'd be like, yeah, and I wouldn't have to deal with this because it's easy for us to just say, I don't want to deal with it. And I don't want to deal with it.
Most of us, we do that. We don't want to deal with things.
And so fast forward, and I know I'm skipping over some stuff, but fast forward to get back to your original question is when I started walking around the hospital and visiting other patients, I would go into this patient's room and I would see this patient would have a family member there, a friend there, which I had people come and visit me. I did have friends and family. But then they would have people from their unit in the room. Oh, hey, JR, we want to introduce you to, this is my platoon sergeant. Hey, this is my squad leader. Hey, this is my battle buddy. Hey, this is whatever. This is my commander. Like, oh, hey, nice to meet you guys. I'm glad you guys are here. Yeah, you know, we're only here for 2 days. We just wanted to come and just be with him, be with her. Did anybody from my unit come and visit me for the nearly 3 years that I spent in the hospital? Did anybody pick up the phone and call me? Where was that lieutenant that took me outside in the middle of the desert and smoked my ass and said, we're bonded, we're connected for life? Where was he? Where was the guy that had the tattoo on his chest that said, no, man, it's because this is a brotherhood? Where was he? Where was the guys that I went to basic training with that happened to be stationed in the same unit and they no longer reached out? Where were they? So don't feed me this narrative. Don't feed me this bullshit. I didn't believe in it. And for a long time, like then one of my sergeants started reaching out and I was like, screw you, man. I don't want to talk to you. There's nothing you can say to me because I'm navigating this war, because it literally is a war. I'm navigating this war by myself. The hell with you guys. And, you know, I had to grow up a little bit and I had to go through my own stuff. And then eventually I did reach out and I did connect with some of those guys. And what I learned was, one, a lot of those guys didn't reach out because it was too much of a reminder. Even though that I was doing okay, to see me the way that I am now was too much of a reminder of the day that I was injured. Because what a lot of them told me is that even though they weren't in the Humvee with me, what they remember is they remember me screaming. They remember me yelling, pleading for someone to pull me out. They remember that.
Who to put you out, Josh?
So it was my Charnose and Valdez. Yeah.
Valdez?
Yeah. And then I think there was 2 Joshes in my platoon, and there was Hart, who was the gunner who was thrown out of the vehicle.
50 cal guy?
Yep. And then there was another guy named Hopkins, and Hopkins was thrown out too. He was essentially the commander for that Humvee. He was banged up a little bit. Hart was the only one, aside from me, that came back to the States because he had injured his leg. And then literally 6 months later, he was back overseas. It's insane. But, you know, like it a lot of those guys, it scarred them in a different way. And that's when I really started to understand that there's a different wound that exists. Because I thought on the 5th of April, I was the only one that would just sit there and just sort of reflect, right? on my rebirth anniversary, as I call it, my rebirth anniversary, like I thought I was the only one that just sat there and just sort of reflected on this day. When I later learned, as I connected with those guys, that no, they sat on the 5th of April, they reflected too, but it was just weighing on them differently. And I get that. I understand that now. And so I was able to now reach back out to them and approach it from a different place. And a lot of them said, listen, man, we're sorry we didn't reach out. We didn't know what to say. We didn't know what to do. So we just removed ourselves. And I'm like, well, aren't we all learning that the secret to all of this is not to remove yourself, but we're all learning.
Do you think if the lieutenant or the leadership at that time, they will change their approach to you, you will stay if you wouldn't injured?
If I wouldn't have been injured?
Yeah.
I think so. That commander that gave us that briefing, he obviously had a positive impact on me. But I think in sort of the day-to-day, the people that I was mainly interacting with, I think the way that they sort of went about their leadership, their approach, I don't know. That was feel good that I was in. I was in that sort of like, oh, that felt good what that commander said. But I think the day-to-day interacting with this type of leadership and the body language and everything else, I think that just would have weighed on me, and I don't think I would have stuck around.
Because I always say that people do not leave the job for the job; they leave for the leadership.
Yeah, they leave the people.
They leave the people,
Yeah.
and even in the organization.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be the leadership. It doesn't have to be the people that are pegged as the executives, as the C-level executives. It could be a coworker that is the same exact job, the same exact role, same exact pay grade, same exact everything. And it's just the culture is horrible. Now that is established. So I have been very fortunate over the last, 15 or so years to travel all over and to be in rooms with brands that we all know. With executives that help those brands continue to grow and to continue to be successful and optimize their reach and optimize their business. And I've been in those rooms and I've had the opportunity to talk to those leaders and talk to the personnel. And I could tell you there's 2 examples recently that I experienced. So I was at an engagement, at a speaking engagement, and I roll in. And as I walk in on the stage, there was a lady interviewing a gentleman. I don't know who they are. I just hear them talking. The lights, of course, are down, and people are paying attention. And I just go straight to the AV table, and I get mic'd up and everything. Well, that session ends. That gentleman walks over to me as he's taking his mic off, and he says, "Hi." He's like, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to stick around for your remarks, for your keynote. Like I really wanted to, but I have a conflict." And I was like, "Hey, man, no problem. It's all good. Great job up there." I didn't know who the guy was. And then I'm talking to the lady that was interviewing him, and she's been with this company for like 10 years, but she doesn't work in the company. She's essentially is a host by trade, and she always comes to the conference, and she's essentially like the MC of it. And she's like, "I love this company. I love coming back. I tell them all the time that I'll do it for free just because I love what it's about." I'm like, wow, okay. I do my engagement. At the end, they do a Q&A. So they have set up 2 mics, and there's a lady that gets up, and she comes up to the mic and she shares. And her voice is cracking a little bit, and she shares that she just got out of an abusive relationship. And the person that she was in a relationship, the abuser, just went to jail. So it seemed pretty serious. So as she's sharing this, all of a sudden the audience stands up and they start clapping for her. So she finishes, she sits down. I let that sort of marinate for a second because I felt like that was a powerful moment. And I was like, hold on, let's bring some attention back to what just happened. And I said, and I said to the lady, I said, "Would you mind standing back up?" She stands back up, and I said, "I want to ask you a simple question. How did that feel as you started to be vulnerable?" Which, kudos to you, my lady, for the courage and the bravery to stand up in front of 1,500 people. Some of them you may know, some of you don't. And to share that intimate part of your life. I applaud you. But what did it feel like to have all these other individuals clapping for you? And she says, "Oh, it felt amazing. That's why I've been working here for as long as I have, because I feel like this is my family." Now, I'm hearing again from somebody else that's talking about this culture, that they love it here. They love the people. And I'm like what? This is pretty impressive. And then the fact that these people just took the cue on their own to just show up for her, not as a coworker, but as a human being. That's okay. So I finish. I get off the stage. I take my mic off. I'm getting ready to head to the airport. And my contact says, hey, do you have a few minutes? Our CEO would like to sit down and talk to you. I'd like to meet you. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. So then all of a sudden these guys roll up in earpieces, big dudes, and they're like talking in their earpiece. And I'm like, who is the CEO that like there's all this like Secret Service type stuff going on? And they start escorting me down different hallways and in service elevators. And all of a sudden I end up in the bottom floor of the hotel, or where there's like these small, little rooms, conference rooms. And I'm standing outside. And as we walk up, a lady walks up to them and she says to the guys, she says, so he's in that room right now. He's on a call. When he finishes that call, he's going to go to this room and jump on another call. But he only has 15 minutes between those calls. And they're like, no, we understand. We got it. And I'm standing there like,
who the hell is it?
I didn't ask to meet this guy. Like, yeah. I mean, I don't need to take up his 15 minutes. I mean, the guy might want to go to the bathroom for all I know. Like, you might want to get a bite to eat. Like, what? I don't need to be here. But I'm like, whatever. The door opens. The guy walks out. It's the guy that was on the stage. That's the CEO. So I'm like, oh, I didn't know. So he pulls me into the room, just the two of us. And he pulls up a chair and he's like, JR, man, I really wanted to be there to listen to your keynote. But I had all these, and he's like, but man, I'm just so fascinated. I want to learn more about you. So tell me about you. And he starts interviewing me as if like I'm trying to get a job at this company. And he's interviewing, I'm asking all these questions, but it's a conversation. And I could tell he's genuinely engaged and he cares. And we talked for about 20 minutes. And I'm the one that ended it. I was like, hey, I know you're tight on time. You have another call you got to make. I'm gonna bail out. Like, but hey, it was a pleasure. And he was like, yeah, no, great, like whatever. And we took a picture together and all that stuff. And I walk out of the room and he goes to the next room and continues his workday. And I get in the car and I'm heading to the airport and I'm thinking to myself, okay, that host that said she loves this company, the lady that got up and shared what she shared. And she said she feels that she's comfortable enough to do that because of the people in the company. The people that stood up and applauded her and uplifted her and supported her and were there for her. That is all because of that guy, that CEO. He established that within the company. He established that culture where you connect as a human being, as a person. You take the time.
Without being judged. Without
the sense of urgency. This guy has shit to do. And he's like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to get to hear from you who you are. Not what I think you are based on your resume, based on what I see, based on what someone else said. What I'm listening to was what I'm going to come to a conclusion. And I was like, he did that. He did that. So as much as people leave organizations because of leaders, but they also could leave just because of a coworker is just a horrible person and has a bad attitude and is jealous and all these other things. But it takes the leadership to establish something within a company, within an organization where the culture is healthy and the culture is embracing, the culture is supportive, and the culture sees people for who they are and gives people space. I mean, the days of just asking you to just show up and just do your job, just clock in and clock out, and I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. to do your job. And I don't care about you. I'm not going to ask you, hey, you all right, man? Like, everything good? Like, how's the family? How's whatever else I know about you? What's going on? Those days of that expectation are long gone because people now want to be somewhere where they feel like they matter. Yeah. Like they're seen, they're heard. But they're felt. Now, I don't want to say that from the HR perspective because then HR professionals are like, hold on, JR. And I'm like, I don't mean it that way, but where they feel like people genuinely care about them.
Care. But, let's go back to what you said about vulnerability. I know you weren't vulnerable.
Yeah, no.
At some time after your search, after your, what happened to you. But most of the people, they don't want to be vulnerable because they think it's a sign of weakness.
100%.
Because they think they're weak. As soon as you tell them, they say, talk to me. They don't want to talk to them.
Yeah, you got to learn how to have emotional
Did you feel
intelligence.
like
100%. You got to have emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is not just to be able to, when we talk about intimacy isn't just to with whoever your partner is.
It's a sharing.
It's not learning how to be intimate with somebody else. Before you can learn how to be intimate with somebody else, and I don't mean intimate in the word that we think, in the way that we think of it. I mean intimate, like just even emotionally being able to show up for that person. You have to be able to be comfortable being intimate with yourself. And what I mean by that is having the emotional intelligence to be able to process your own emotions, process your own thoughts, really work on your own emotions, work on your own thoughts, like show up for yourself. Show up for yourself. That's what you have to be able to do before you can even try to be intimate with anybody else, right? It's no different than like, I gotta, I have trust issues or I like, well, then how are you going to get in a relationship?
Basically, you have to connect with yourself.
You have to connect with yourself first and foremost. And so I was ruining relationships left and right, man.
Yeah, you had many girlfriends.
I did, but I was just ruining relationships. Like it was just like it was anytime anything felt hard, I was like, peace out. Like I'm not doing this. I'm out, right? Because I had to protect myself. And so no, I wasn't being vulnerable at all because I definitely felt it was a sign of weakness. Plus, I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I didn't know what that meant. Like, I'm supposed to just walk around crying all day? Like, is that what vulnerability is? What do you mean to me? Like, am I supposed to be in a circle with a bunch of other people that have been through something traumatic and just, like, I don't know. I don't know what vulnerability is. I don't know what it's supposed to feel like. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I didn't know. I didn't understand any of it. And I never even heard the word vulnerability. That wasn't something that was ever brought up to me. Like, and I was just surviving. Just think of me being in a river, not knowing how to swim, and the current so strong and it's just pushing me down this river. And all I'm trying to do is just trying to get up above water just so I can get a gasp for air and just hold on just a little bit longer until I get to another point. Maybe I can find some object that's kind of hanging over the river that I can grab onto that can just pull me up for a few seconds, maybe a couple minutes so I can breathe. But then guess what? Boom, I don't have everything that I need to hold me up, to pull myself up, to get myself out of that situation. I stay in it because eventually I'm going to get weak and I'm going to lose grip and I'm back in it, just trying to survive as this current just pushing me down the river. That's what a lot of us are doing in life. We're just being pushed down this current of all these things, traumatic events, responsibilities, everything that is just overwhelming, and we're just trying to survive. So when someone on the road, all of a sudden you accidentally cut them off, or they cut you off, or someone's driving slow and they speed, and they're like, yeah, I try. I'm a human being, but I try to be a little bit more patient and show a little bit more grace because I'm like, you know what? That person's surviving. That person is just surviving. And I just happen to be an obstacle in the way right now that's a little triggering to them for whatever it is that I did, whether it was intentional or not. That person's just surviving. And I had to eventually learn that I can't just sit here. That's not a way to have sustain. You can't, there's no longevity in that. You can't sustain that. Like you can't. You're never going to really get the most out of what life has the opportunity to
basically
give you.
After your injury, you were surviving, you were kind of experienced it, but when you got to the point that you said enough is enough, this is a new JR, this is my new look, I gotta live with it. That's not easy, JR.
It's not, but let me tell you what allowed me to do that was my best friend. My best friend, this is 2 years after I was out of the military now, so I'm 24 years old, just turned 24, and I happened to be with my best friend and some other vets. We were traveling. We were in Indianapolis for a charity event, and we went out to dinner the night before everything. And you had a couple drinks, and I sort of got irritated by something on the drive back to the hotel. Somebody said something. They didn't even say it to me. It was just something that was said out loud. And just because I was in a bad place, I just kind of made a snarky remark. And my best friend who was driving the car told me to chill out. And I'm in the third row, and I was like, man, don't tell me to chill out. Like, don't talk to me like that. And of course, he didn't like what I said. And then I told him, I said, well, pull over. I'll whoop your ass right now. That's what I told him. So he pulls over. Now, you develop a very dark sense of humor when you go through something like this. I already had a sense of humor, and I think humor is the key, but you develop a darker sense of humor. And so here I am in the third row trying to get out of this car, and I'm going out through the passenger side, like the back door, and there's a couple of vets in the second row that are amputees, prosthetics. And one of the guys grabs me around my waist and he's like, "No, JR," trying to hold me back from getting out of this car and coming around to the driver's side to fight. "No, JR." And I'm dragging this dude that has prosthetic legs like on the ground. And one of his legs pops off, like goes, prosthetic pops off. But I don't pay attention to that. I'm just like in this space where I'm just enraged. And I go around to the driver's side. And at that point, my buddy got back in the car and he locked the door. He didn't want anything to do with me. But I was committed and I was so mad that I was like, I'm going to get you out of this car one way or another. And I took my shirt off and I wrapped it around my arm, my hand, and I started punching the window. Now, I was smart enough to be like, I'm not punching the window barehanded. I'm going to protect these grafts. I didn't break the window, which was humbling because then I had to walk my ass back to the other side of the car and get back in. And I get back in the car and we're driving back to the hotel and it's quiet and it's like you can feel the energy. It's heavy, and I'm just in the backseat, just fuming. We get to the hotel. At this point, it's like 2:00, maybe 3:00 in the morning. Everybody gets out of the car. I'm walking in front of the car, going into the hotel. My buddy Dan in the driver's seat says, "JR, get in the car." I turn around, I walk, and I get in the passenger seat. This is the guy I wanted to fight maybe 15 minutes ago. I get in the passenger seat. I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Man, you've healed physically, but you have not healed emotionally or mentally."
Mentally.
He says, "Man, you need to cry." That's what he said to me. I was like, "What?" He says, "You need to cry." And I was like, "About what? I don't need to cry." He's like, "Yes, you do, man. You got to cry. You need to cry." And he just kept telling me I needed to cry. And before you know it, I just started crying. I didn't even know what I was crying about. I just started crying. And then before you know it, man, I started just sharing a bunch of stuff. Like
you started being vulnerable.
I just started boom, boom, just dumping. Let me tell you how impactful and important that moment was. Every time he and I would have a conversation prior to that night, he would always, whether it was over the phone or in person, he would always end it with, "I love you." He would always tell me he loved me. And again, my dad left when I was 9 months old. There was no man in my life. I've never heard a man ever say he loved me. So I just kind of was like, "Oh." So the only way I can respond to that was like, "All right, bro." Like I didn't know any other way to respond. I didn't know how to receive that. And that night, after, really me sharing a lot of things, I was the first one that looked at him and said, "I love you."
Wow.
Because I felt safe in this space. I felt that this was a man that unconditionally loved me, and he was showing up for me. And here's the funny part about that. When people are like, "Oh my God, did you guys fight?" I'm like, "No, we didn't fight." And thank God we didn't, because I'm 5'9", I'm about 200 pounds. This dude is 6'4", 280 pounds. So if he really wanted to fight,
game is over.
Oh man, it would have like that meme on social media when it's people use it when in relationships where like the husband or the wife, more of the husbands, makes a smart ass remark to the wife, and then all of a sudden it cuts to and they have this song where the person's dead and they're playing the sad music, and I'm like, because that's how my life would have ended if this dude really wanted to fight me. But instead of leaning in that way, he chose to show up as a human being, as a person that just cared about me. And that's hard for a lot of people to do. And that was the moment that honestly, my life changed. My life changed after that.
In which way?
Every opportunity that I was hoping that I would get that wasn't happening, all of a sudden started coming to the table. Meaning I started getting opportunities to speak. I've been wanting to speak. I was doing a little bit here and there, but I wasn't really doing it on the scale that I thought I could and that I wanted to. All of a sudden now, opportunities are starting to present themselves.
Did your beliefs change?
All of a sudden, I get an email to be in People magazine. I wasn't a celebrity. I wasn't anything, but they wanted to select me as one of the vets that they were going to highlight for the anniversary of the war in Iraq, 5 years. It was 2008. So here I am now. I get photographed and I have a 2-page spread in this magazine, which was huge. And then all of a sudden, a couple of months later, I get an email to audition to become an actor on a soap opera.
And that was very interesting because they were looking for somebody actually injured in Iraq or Afghanistan. That was an actual injury. And you were very funny because you said that, okay, I don't need a makeup. What was that
They're
for?
like, hey, your first scene is at 9 a.m., but we're going to need you to show up at 7 a.m. for hair and makeup. I'm like, guys.
No, you said because you
let's not do that. I don't need hair and makeup, guys. Like,
I have the real injury.
Yeah, like this is it. Like, this is what you want on camera, right? And that was the thing that I told him. I was like, the thing about my scars, and at this point, again, I know I'm jumping around, but at this point, I had learned to accept and understand that in these scars, there is an incredible opportunity, a tool, a key, if you will, to open up a door to deeper connection and deeper conversations.
It's not just a look.
I started to learn that me going on that show, that my scars were, were the opportunity for me to get people's attention. And not because I wanted attention, but because it was an opportunity, instead of people just looking at me and like wondering what happened to him, and then walking away and never knowing. When people looked at me, and I knew she was looking at me, I'd walk up to her like, how you doing? And she was like, I'm good. How are you? And I'm like, I'm good. Man, it's hot today. And she's like, yeah, no, it's crazy. I'm like, I know. Like, I did this earlier. Oh, I like doing that. That's fun. All of a sudden now we're connected as human beings. It's not even about the scars anymore. So I use the scars as a way to take a 15-second window of curiosity when people looked at me and wondered what happened.
To connect.
To then extend that into hopefully 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 15 minutes of educated dialogue. And what that entails is not like I have to talk to you about, different. I just have to show you that I'm a human being, that I'm a person, that what you saw that caused this interaction to start is very different. Like I'm a person, like one of your staff, like he rolled in, he's like, you're a Saints fan, right? And I was like, yeah. He's like, it's hard, isn't it? I'm like, oh man, don't even get me started. I'm a sports guy. I love sports. I like, but if people just fixated on what they saw and like, oh my God, and never try to have a conversation with me, they would lose that part of me. They would miss out on the opportunity to connect with somebody who I think is a pretty cool person. Like I bring a lot of good, and I also bring some baggage as well. Like I'm a human being, and so after that interaction with my buddy Dan, that's his name, Dan taught me that it's okay to start to share and be vulnerable. It's okay. Yes, you're going to encounter some spaces where people aren't equipped and aren't ready to receive that.
They don't understand.
And that's okay. You go to the next space and you're gonna find people that are gonna receive.
They're gonna judge you no matter what.
Exactly. And so the more that I started to learn how to be vulnerable, the more I felt like, okay, now I'm really doing something. I also had to change, and I think vets have a hard time with this, is that we just assume and expect people to know who we are and what we've gone through and what we're going through.
That's what we're not explaining.
And the reality is, as the very popular soundbite is, 1% of our population serve in the military. So that's a very small group of people trying to reach the masses to tell them this is who we are. So who better to go and tell those people who we are than us? And so I realized I needed to change the way that I was communicating with people, with civilians, as we call them. I was realizing that I was communicating with people maybe from a place of anger, of resentment, because I felt like no one was showing up for me. No one was helping me. People were doing a lot of yapping and no one was showing up. So then I started to become even more irritated and angry and impatient with people. And I realized if I changed, it's not what I say, it's how I say it.
How you say it.
And if I changed that, then maybe people would be more receptive. And literally my life took off after that. Once I understood that very simple thing, to now when I get on stage, man, I'll tell I tell some crazy stories on stage. I mean, I'm just completely open.
How hard was it the first time you get on the stage? Like, what you went through, and the judgment of others, people looking at you, and how hard was that?
Well, for me, it was more. I don't know if I ever really thought about how people look at me. there's just that element of like imposter syndrome that, you know, that you kind of, I think all of us at some level kind of suffer from. And I think I was like, am I qualified to be on this stage for 15 minutes to share, to talk? Am I educated enough? Am I articulate enough? I mean, the way I speak now is very different than the way that I spoke when I was 19 and younger. Like I'm from the South. I'm a Southern boy. Now, granted, yes, I have Hispanic roots, but I was born and raised in the South, and I sounded like a Southerner. And the way that I speak, like there's an interview. It's honestly the first. It was about 8 months after I was injured, and it was the first major interview I had ever done, and it was for 60 Minutes with this anchor, David Martin. And every now and then I'll go back and watch it and just listen to the way that I communicated, the way that I spoke, my accent. You would not think that this is the same person. If I put it side by side, like on social media, people would be like, that's not JR. And I'm like, yes, it is. That's JR.
You changed.
I've changed, right? Like I've evolved, I've grown. And I think that is one of the things that I worried about when I first started doing this is like, do I even belong? Am I educated? Am I articulate? Am I conveying the things that I feel and experience in the right way? And what I learned afterwards was all these people coming up to me and saying, oh man, we can relate to you. And I'm like, wait, you relate to me? I was like, were you burned? I'm like, no. Were you in a hospital? No. I'm like, how can you relate to me? And people are like, listen, man, we understand like losing your identity. You know, I used to have this job for X amount of years, and then all of a sudden the company folded or they laid me off. And now I'm doing something completely different. I had to reinvent myself. You know, the identity, like my relationship has ended, going through a divorce, or my identity. I've lost someone very dear to me. Like I'm going through some change right now. I'm afraid because I'm in a stage of life where I don't know what's next. I don't know. I don't have any control. I worry and I'm like, that was when it clicked for me. And I was like, so I'm not coming up here just talking about my experience in the military overseas. I'm talking about my experience as a human being, because you take the military and my experience overseas out of the equation. I could be in a car driving here in Austin and get into a car accident and it go up in flames and I get the same result. Is that going to change anything? No, because I still went through the same thing. I was still trapped on a car on Mopac like for 5 minutes, having the same experience and with the same injury, with the same recovery. So you just change the set. That's all you do. It's the same story. You just change the set. That's it. So I realized, like, as a human being, I'm feeling the same things, and I felt the same things that other people have felt and are feeling. And everybody navigates those same emotions. And when you take the experience out of it and you insert it with emotion, with feelings, that takes a level of vulnerability. That's when people start to connect with you. And that's why I've been able to, honestly, I haven't been on TV in years. Like I've done some interviews here and there. Like I've been on some shows here and there, you know, like just people that know me and they reach out for something, or maybe a social media campaign or something. But I haven't done anything like from a mass standpoint of like the level of Dance with the Stars or being a New York Times bestseller and all the publicity that came with that. I haven't done anything. But why am I still being booked as if I am somebody that is on? Because now in the industry, in the space, I have established myself and people understand this is a guy that is not just going to bring his energy and his passion, but he's going to bring his ability to connect with people.
Connecting with people is not really easy. Some people don't understand.
No, it's not.
And then it happens when you connect with yourself, because you would not be able to connect with your audience. You wouldn't connect with yourself.
Absolutely.
At one point you said, enough is enough. I'm going to connect with myself. I want to believe who I am right now. You were a pretty handsome boy. I watched, I look at your things, and then now you're
prior to my injury.
Yeah.
You like that mustache?
Yeah.
I had a nice full thick mustache by like 13.
And then all this injury happens, and here you go, boom, in one day your identity changes. You're a new person. Acceptance of that is not easy.
It's not, man. It took me years. I mean, I remember, a doctor telling me at one point, he's like, well, we could do a lot of surgeries. There's a lot of things that we could do.
36? How many?
I don't even know at this point. It's more than that, but yes, it's probably it's easily in the 40 range. But he's like, we can do a lot of procedures now where we can get you back. We can get you pretty close to what you used to look like. Now, did he say that? That sounds like a pretty bold statement from a doctor to make, and probably one that any doctor would not make. Or is that what I heard? Because that's what I wanted to hear. That's probably more likely. So I went through all those surgeries. Man, they were like, man, we can get you hair again. I was like, I can have hair again? Because that was my identity, man.
He's so funny.
Dude, I was in school, man. Like, listen, my son is 3 years old and I see that curly hair and the girls are like,
you had a great hair.
We love his hair. Yeah. And I'm like, his name is Leo. And I'm like, Leo,
but let
that's going to work well for you, my man. I know. And I tried to go backwards. I was trying for years to go backwards to get the hair that I used to have, to get the look that I used to have. And there was a reason, there's a metaphor in that. There's a reason why I hadn't got to where I needed to get to. And I hadn't gotten the opportunities because I hadn't accepted anything. And I had to go through my own process, and everybody has to go through their own time frame and their process. But once I accepted, and I was like, why am I putting myself through all these surgeries with these tissue expanders in my head? Why am I putting myself through these procedures that put a tissue expander in my chest just so I can have a little bit of hair? First of all, it's incredible what they medically can do. It is incredible. But I was like, why am I putting myself through that? Because then, like, I can grow hair. Like, now there's some patches that would be missing because I stopped.
Me too.
I stopped the procedure. I was like, I don't want to go through it anymore. But like when the hair would grow, because I wanted to see what it would look like, man, it looked horrible. There was like hair growing in all different directions. Like there was no way to style that. So I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to stop doing these procedures. I'm going to stop trying to capture who I used to be. And I'm just going to embrace who I am now and see how that works out for me. And I remember pulling out a razor, and I didn't know how the hell to shave my head, and then just putting shaving cream on my head and just starting to shave. And then learning how to shave my head the right way so I can get that smooth.
You're doing
effect.
a good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
a lot of cuts. I had to go through in order to get this.
Well, let me tell you about Diana. You are a smart free man. Those New York trips worked.
Yes,
right?
yes, they did.
How did you cut Diana?
So Diana, when I joined All My Children, Diana was the executive. She was the assistant to the executive producer with Julie, the executive producer of All My Children. And I used to just go into her office and just cut up because I connected more with the crew. Like the actors, we came from like different worlds in a sense, even though we really didn't. But initially I thought like, I can't sit down and have a conversation with Cameron Matheson. There's nothing that we have in common. I can't sit down and have a conversation with Susan Lucci. There's nothing we have in common. With Alicia Minshew, I can't talk to these big characters. I can't connect with them. I immediately assumed like they're all like divas and sort of what we think of like actors, right? And so who did I connect with? I hung out with the crew. I mean, cameraman to grips to props to lighting. I hung out with the writers. I hung out with those were my people. That's where I spent most of my time. And then the more I started to get to know the actors, I was like, oh shit, like they're cool. But I used to go into Dinah's office all the time. I used to have to connect with
asking questions.
Well, I had to because I had to get to the executive producer, and that was the only way to get to the EP was through her. And the more that we hung out, it was like, oh, now the show, when I joined the show, it was in New York. A year after I joined the show, the show moved to LA.
Yeah.
Had the show never moved to LA, I don't know what would have come of our relationship, to be honest, because when we were in LA, we didn't really know a lot of people, so we just spent a lot of time together. Like we were navigating LA together, right? Understanding what LA was about, and so we were just hanging out, spending a lot of time. And so all the time we spent together, all of a sudden you started to like develop feelings, and you're like, oh. And I started to look at her a little bit differently, and you realize we were doing things that couples should be doing, right? You're like, hey, you want to go to the movie? We're going to the movie late at night, just the two of us. Like we're doing all these things that couples do, right? And one day I just sort of just said, hey, do you ever look at me any differently? And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't know, like, differently. Like not as a friend, but more. And she was like, oh no. And I was like, why? She's like, because if the relationship doesn't work out, then, you know, we won't talk, and I want to have you in my life forever. And this is corny ass JR. And I was like, but baby, I see me in your life, not just 6 months from now, 6 years from now. I see myself in your life forever. And she was like, all right, cool, let's try. And, you know, so we've had our own challenges, right? Like, I mean, it is no secret that, you know, we had our daughter, and a year when she turned a year, we split up. And I mean, this is real, like, this is part of my story in a sense of where we split up. I was traveling nonstop. I was in South Africa filming a show for 3 months, like, and I would come back to the States, and I would grab my daughter, and I would go to my mom's house, and I would spend, you know, a week with my daughter. Like, or I'd be in New York, and I'd be like, I'm going to grab my daughter and spend a week in a hotel with my daughter and do things around the city. Like, I mean, that's really what happened in my life. And we were co-parenting. I was paying child support. Like, it was legit. Like, it was not a game. It was like, we weren't just going through it. No, it was done. And, you know, what I identified for me personally, there were some things that I needed to still work on. I had done enough work to get to that point in my life. But to get to the next point in my life, there was a little deeper gear that I needed to get into. Relationship-wise. And because I was still to some degree being guarded. And so I had to like really lean into that. And once I did, then I moved to New York, because then I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? And listen, there's multiple points in this, and I don't know how much time we have, but I don't want to take up too much time, but I will just share this. So after dancing, I was all over the place. I was everywhere.
After Dancing with the Stars. Yeah.
I was everywhere. And
you went against Kardashians.
I guess, yeah, the Kardashians. And I was everywhere, man. I mean, I couldn't ask for any more success. Like, I mean, I mean, you name it. I was hanging, I was talking, I was doing all the things that I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd be doing. I was in circles. It was wild. And, you know, I started from a speaking standpoint when I got into this industry. I did it because I felt like I had something to give to people. And I wanted to serve. That was my way of serving. That was my way of giving back to people through speaking. And then it turned into like, you can actually make a living doing this. And so now the fees, you know, now your team is built out. Now the fees are higher.
It's a business.
The fees are higher. Now the fees are going up. Now you're doing less, but you're making more money because the fees have increased, right? There's a demand now. Guess what happened? JR got sucked in by that. JR started chasing all the money that was coming. JR started chasing all
Thanks for being vulnerable.
The acknowledgement. I started like, all of a sudden now I find myself in company of people. I'm like, oh, and people are like, my God, you're one of the best in the industry. You're this, you're that. And I'm like, I'm 27 years old and I'm rocking this shit. I'm 29 years old and I'm killing it. And that's what I started to operate from.
Wow.
So anytime my agents would send me an email or call me or text them and they're like, hey, we got an offer. I'm like, does it work logistically? And they'd be like, yeah. I'm like, cool, accept it. I wouldn't even worry about who it was half the time. I would just be like, cool, I'll take it. They're going to pay me. All right, cool, let's go. And I would literally overwhelm myself to where I'd finish maybe at 10 o'clock at night. In order for me to make the next date, that meant I had to drive 4 hours to the nearest airport so I could take that flight. I did it. But did I do it because I was doing it because I loved it? No, I was doing it because I was chasing the money. I was chasing the success. I was chasing the acknowledgement.
Wow.
And life, like always, all of a sudden does a counterpunch, knocks your ass out, puts you on your ass,
the devil
and
comes.
took it away from me. All of a sudden now nobody was calling. Nobody was reaching out. There was no money coming in. I went from doing easily 80 events a year, which is insane, to traveling 300 days out of the year, to all of a sudden now I might do 2, 3 a year. There's like no cash coming through. Meanwhile, I've burnt all this money because I've had to take care of people. I wasn't living lavishly. I took care of people, right? And I spent all this time in the mix of business not really being as, you know. And I remember like calling my agents. Well, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What do I need to do? What do I need to talk about? What do I need to say? And they were like, we don't know. And when I realized what I needed to do, And this is how I found this out. Now, life forced me to stop and slow down, but I would go every day to the park. And I had a black lab, Romeo. He's in the book, and
yeah, I saw it.
He's that was my dude, man. Like I literally looked at him like he was my son. Like, I mean, I could probably start crying right now just because of the role that he played in my life at the time that he played. I mean, animals are special, but he was so special to me, and the way that he came into my life was so unpredictable, and it was just what I needed. And he was a companion for me. And so I would go to the park, and I would just sit under this tree, and there was like this little creek, and he would jump in, and I would just go there every day. And the mix of me being there would just be the two of us, no one else. And the mix of me being there, I realized, came to the conclusion that I'm sitting there looking outward for answers to solutions to this problem of where I don't have any business, I'm not making any money, when all I needed to do was look here at myself. And the more time I spent at that park with Romeo, I came to the realization that I don't need to change anything. Like, what I need to, there's one thing I do need to change. Actually, there's nothing, no one else can do. That's what I mean. I needed to change one thing. And what I needed to change is why I was doing this work in the first place.
Your why.
I needed to get back to my purpose, my core, my why. I needed to get back to that. And then I started figuring out, what do I want to do with my life? So I decided, my daughter was living in New York with Diana. So I decided, you know what? Something I've always wanted to do is go to college. So I moved to New York.
Wow.
So I can go to college, so I can be with my daughter. I can be a dad. That's the thing that brings me joy and happiness, is being with her. So I moved to New York. Well, guess what happens? You spend more time now with the co-parent, right? Like, you spend a little more time, and we realized, Diana, that the more time we spent together, we realized we still have feelings for each other. And so one day we just talked, and we kind of worked through a lot of that stuff. And we said, do we want to try this again? And we did. My daughter was 4 years old. So for 3 years, I was doing this like long distance parenting, spending time with my daughter. And it broke my heart, man. It broke my heart. And I did everything I could to try to be in my daughter's life and to have that connection with her. And so when her and I decided we were going to try this again, we were vulnerable with each other. There was things she identified about herself. There were things I identified about myself. We brought all that to the table, and we just leaned in. And so I'm proud to say that, we're married, and, we have another knucklehead, another kid, and Leo, which people say like, oh, I would have loved to have met the younger JR. And I'm like, just come to my house. He's running around the living room like he's a madman. And I look at him, and I'm just reminded of, that's who I was. That's who I was. We have the same personality. His demeanor, his energy, his DNA is destined for him to be this person that lights up a space, that brings energy into a room. That's who he's destined to be. My job and Diana's job is to hopefully try to protect him as much as we can, so the environment or experiences don't take that away from him. Because my experiences were taking it away from me. My environments were taking it away from me. Dan gave it back to me. And the more people I started to interact with, the more I started to be vulnerable, the more I started to get that old DNA. I started getting back to that person. That's why when I went on dancing, it was no big deal for me. That stage didn't overwhelm me. I was never nervous.
Are you serious? I was
never
thing.
nervous. Never nervous.
3 months practice, and
The first show, we're getting ready to go live. Karina Smirnoff is standing right in front of me. She's looking at me, and the announcer is like saying our names, introducing us, saying JR Martinez and his partner, Karina Smirnoff, dancing the Viennese waltz. They're introducing. And she looks at me like, she gives me this look like, okay, here we go. Like, she's a pro. She's done this. She knows like it could be nerve-wracking. And I looked at her, and this is exactly what I said to her. I was like, and the music started, and I did my thing, man. And her mom said to her, leave him alone. He clearly is a person that when the lights come on, he knows.
Well, you can move the hips, man. I'm serious. You got the move.
I would. I used to say it's because I'm Latino, but I've met some Latinos that can't move. So I just must credit it. I honestly credit it to my mom. Like, I used to dance on my mom all the time.
How is the relationship with mom now?
We haven't spoken in 4 years.
We don't want to get into that, but I know you guys had a rough patch and went a lot together, and she sacrificed a lot.
Yeah.
And I hope one day you get back together and just,
Yeah, listen, I hold space in my heart. Like there's nothing. My mother has experienced a lot of trauma.
A lot.
Prior to me being born.
She went through a lot. You got to give it to her.
100%. And she was doing the best that she could. And
with what she had.
With what she had, absolutely. But what I realized, and just obviously I'm shortening this, and people are going to be like, "What do you mean? Like you can't just end it." But what was not fair to me, because I was the only consistent thing in my mother's life. I have been the only consistent thing in her life. Like prior to me joining the military for 19 years, I was the only consistent thing. People came and went. My grandparents, they gave her up when she was a child. My grandfather, her dad, would come in her life sporadically. Her mom would come in her life sporadically. Family members sporadically. Relationships sporadically. Like it just, everything was not long term. It was short term. So my mother had developed this fear of losing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when people operate from that place, it sometimes can come with all this other stuff. And my mother had conditioned me where, like she's my queen. Like I will never dismiss what my mother has done for me. Like I will never do that. But at the same time, I also am entitled as a person to say to her, I love you. And I will always be here for you, and the door will always be open. But it is not fair to me when you pick up the phone because of your triggers and because of you not dealing with your trauma. I'm your punching bag. And you're attacking me emotionally, mentally. That's not fair to me, because now that weighs on me, and now I carry that everywhere I go. And then when you're upset, I immediately drop everything, jump on the plane and go to you and be like, and I've done this for years and years and years and years. And it's not fair to me. I was like, if you want to call me and we want to talk about how we heal and move forward, I'm here for that.
Because you are that kind of person.
But I can't continue to do this. And that was something I learned, that boundaries are important. And I never thought I would use the word boundaries with my mother. That's just something you don't do, especially in certain cultures, like the Hispanic culture. You don't use the word boundaries with your mother.
Oh, yeah.
You get your ass whooped if you say boundaries. Well, what my mother did, because she couldn't whoop me because I wasn't in her face, I was on the phone with her and I said, Mom, I have to establish boundaries. Like I have to protect myself and my energy. I'm trying to move forward in life. And she said, well, then I'll tell everyone I don't have a son. Now, she said that to me many times. Did that hurt me? No, because I know that's her defense mechanism. That's where she's operating from. So I love my mother. I love her. Like I don't focus on the hardships. I don't focus on the negative things. I have very beautiful, fond, vibrant memories of my mother. And I'm speaking as if she's passed, but she hasn't been in my life. But I have these beautiful memories of her. Beautiful memories of her taking me to lakes.
Most of your book is about her.
Yeah, well, because it's her story. It's I am who I am a lot of ways because of her, the good and the bad, right? And so, it is what it is. And I'm still young. She's still young, and everyone has their journey and everyone has their time, but everyone's entitled as well to take care of themselves and do what's best for them.
You still talking to your sisters?
I talk to my sister every now and then. It's interesting, man. There's so many layers to my story because the fascinating thing is my sister was born in El Salvador.
Yeah.
I was born here. She was raised there. I was raised here. So we saw each other during those, visits. She looks at me like, you have it all, right? You got to be raised by mom, and you were born in the States, and I'm looking at her and I'm like, but you got to be with grandma and uncles and aunts and cousins. And I yearn to have family like that. I just had my mom, right? And my mom's important, right? But I when I knew I had this extended family in El Salvador, I was like, all I want to do is be with that family, right? Like that to me was so special. And so it's almost like she couldn't see that, you know, and I would tell her, I was like, when I became an adult, I'm like, listen, yes, I had mom, but there was a lot of challenges that came with that. You didn't have to deal with that. I did. I dealt with that. I took the brunt of all of that. You didn't deal with that. So why are you attacking me? It's not my fault. And it's this irony of just both of us sort of looking at each other saying, well, you had it better than me, which is crazy. And, you know, because I have fond memories of going to El Salvador where my family didn't have lights, didn't have electricity. Use the bathroom in the woods. That's where...
You know, as I said before, your book is so inspiring, but I want to ask you this. A lot of people, they're going through a harsh time professionally, personally right now, and they think that's it. This is what it is. And they're stuck. Like they can't change. They don't want to believe that, you know, there is other side. They don't want to believe that they can change things and they can be a new person, because you went through that. You went through that harsh times, the pain and the suffering. You came out of it. You were a new JR, new look, new person, new perspective. What advice do you have for those people that are right now, they are facing those challenges and they say, I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. I'm stuck.
So as I've started doing yoga again, in the first, 2-3 minutes of yoga, the instructor asks you to close your eyes, and the instructor then asks you to a very prominent question, but I always have issues with it. I always have struggles with this question. And what's your intention for this class? What's the intention? Why are you here? What do you want to accomplish in the next 60 minutes? And the reason I struggle with that is because I'm like, well, I'm just here because I need to work out. But did I really ever think about it? And when I sit there and I'm like, okay, the intention. Okay, then for me, I go through my process and I'm like, this is why I'm here. It's not just simple as like, I just want to work out. No, it's deeper than that. It serves a different purpose for me. And so I think that's something that a lot of us don't do. We don't set an intention for a relationship. We don't set an intention for our lives. We don't set an intention for a conversation that we have with somebody, right? Like you don't operate from that place. You're just operating. And I think the thing that I would tell people, and I have told people that are in that phase going through it, is one, you have to go through it. There's no other way around it. You have to go through it. So you can't try to take a shortcut. There's no ways that is going to be like rerouting you to avoid, build up over there. No, there's traffic anywhere. It's just going to take you longer to get there then, right? You might not stop and sit in that traffic, but it's going to take you longer to get there. So you have to still go through it. You have to feel it. But I think it's like, what is it about the situation that you don't like? I think you have to have those conversations with yourself and identify what is it that you don't like? What makes you unhappy about where life is right now, where your life is right now? What is it? Well, some people will say, well, it's not that I lost my job. It's that I lost my job that allowed me to do this. And this thing is what I love to do. Well, see, okay, well, you're focused on the job. Focus on the thing that you love to do, because you could do that anywhere. I mean, I met somebody recently that was in law enforcement for a very long time, serving people, serving their community. That person recently retired. Now that person's working in a nonprofit. Guess what? It's a different organization, but what are they still doing? Serving people. So I think all of us that are going through something, we then have to then identify what is it that we are not happy about? What is it that we want out of our lives? I think that's the thing. And at some point, you have to identify that there's some things that you're going to have to cut off that no longer serve you. And that means boundaries with some people.
Negative people.
People that love you, people that probably have good intentions, but maybe just don't serve you in this way right now. And you can just categorize them. You could just say, hey, when I'm in this space, these are the people that I reach out to. When I'm in this space, these are the people I reach out to.
Your circle.
Yeah. You just, but you put everybody in a different part of the circle, right? Like if I'm in a horrible place and I need to talk to somebody, am I going to call my buddy that is always cutting up and clowning and doing that? No, that's not the guy, because he's probably not emotionally ready to do that. I'm going to call this other person over here. But when I'm in a good place and I want to cut up and have a good time, then I'm going to call that buddy. If I keep calling that dude, guess what? I'm just going to be frustrated because that dude's like, he doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know how to show up for me. So I have to then, doesn't mean he doesn't serve me. It just means I know where he operates on this table. I know where he sits at the table in my life. And so I think for me is like, listen, you have to go through it. If it's hard for you to find some light, then the thing that I did is I got outside of my environment and I eliminated expectations. I forgot about the long-term expectations that I needed to have this figured out, that figured out, this figured out, because that was too overwhelming. And I went to operate from a place of a Forrest Gump formula where it was literally just short-term, the moment, the now. And I was present in every single moment. I practiced gratitude. I found something to be grateful for every single day, even though I was going through some shit. There was something I could be grateful for every single day. The more that I practiced that, the more each day became manageable. I was no longer overwhelmed and inundated by this pressure of long term. I could focus on now. And if you can rewire your mind to identify what's consuming so much of your energy and how you can change that narrative and focus on something completely different that's positive, that serves you, your energy will follow. And you'll find yourself in the world present and aware and connecting with people. And you're going to encounter someone that's going to say something to you at a coffee shop in passing.
Amen. I totally believe that.
And that's literally going to say the thing that you need. But if you kept your ass in the house with your head down, you're never going to meet that person. We spend so much time driving down the road looking for the big billboards, for the big reveal, the big sign to tell us what life is going to, what the next step is.
You got to get out.
When the reality is all the signs that we need to guide us, to get us to where we need to go to are at eye level. Yield, slow down, stop. Red light, yellow light, green light. It's all right here, but we just ignore those and we're looking up. We're looking for the big thing. You need to look here, man. And you need to just get outside of your environment. You need to recalibrate the way you look at your day, at your life, and just say, practice gratitude.
You know, I can spend days with you, but I know your time is limited. But this is my last question. Do you have any regrets?
No.
Really?
No. Why? Why do I regret?
No, I salute you.
No, I don't. I mean, listen, I've hurt some people.
Me too.
You know, I've done some things. I'm not proud of the ways sometimes that I, but there's no regret in that. There's still a lesson in that. There's a learning opportunity in that. There's something that I got to pay attention to. And I'm like, do I like the way how I responded? Do I like how I showed up? And the answer is no. Then I got to figure this out then. I'm in a space right now where I'm actually about to go back to therapy.
Really?
Yeah. And not because like I have this overwhelming thing
just
that's
talking.
Just maintenance, man.
Maintenance.
It's maintenance.
Like a car, yeah. We all need that.
Get my oil changed.
Really, we
you
all
don't have
need
to get
that.
out of your car anymore. Like I'm just trying
that.
to like pop on the virtual and just be like, hey, so listen, I did this podcast the other day with this dude named Rami. He said something, he pissed me off. Like, help me work through that. And they're gonna be like, all right, cool. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Like just silly things, just as a human being, just work through some things, right? And but I don't have any regrets. There's nothing, because the only way I can look at things as regrets is if I didn't learn anything from it. And I feel like I've learned a lot from everything that I've experienced. And so it's just made me, I believe, a more present person and a more emotionally intelligent person for myself and then for others. It's made me a little bit less patient at times. My buddy said to me the other day, he says, I like trauma, not drama.
That's so
good.
That's so good.
Because you know what? You call me, man. You call me. You going through some? I'll be there for you. I got you. I'll talk to you. My buddy called me 2 years ago and was like, man, I'm going through it. He was navigated a bunch of dark stuff. I was on the phone with that dude every day, and now he's in a great place in his life.
Wow.
And we still talk, but it's not every day. But somebody else calls me and they're like, oh my God. So that I don't have time for that shit. I'm going to cut you off. I'm not the person at the table to be calling. You might want to call somebody else at the table. That's not me. Because then I'm going to turn into the person you don't want to talk to. I'm going to turn into, you're going to describe me as somebody who is, not sensitive and not empathetic or not listening or whatever. No. It's not that I'm not that person. I just don't do it for that kind of stuff. So I'll show up as a human being for you when you need me, 100%, even a stranger. But if you start kind of drawing this thing out and getting into dramatic shit, I ain't got time for that. Life is too short, man. I don't want to die sitting there dealing with your drama or dealing with drama in general. Living life, baby.
Yeah, folks, for those of you who are watching or listening to this podcast, please leave us a comment. If you have any message for JR or me, we are
only
here.
Positive ones, though.
Only
Negative ones, though, we'll block you.
Or if you have any questions,
and we'll
for
report
him.
you.
Yeah. But definitely, the book is amazing. I read it. Amazing book. Go and get it. Amazon and your website also. Yeah. And amazing book. But thanks, buddy. Thanks for being here. I learned a lot.
Well, thanks for being patient. I mean, it's been a.
Man,
you told me it's been 2 years and 2 months, 7 hours, 37 minutes, and 14 seconds since the last time we talked.
I did it. We had so much fun,
and here we are. And I'm glad that we're here.
And I can't wait for you to see the future. I'm just really. I know you're gonna go. You're gonna do well, man. You are doing well. And you're gonna help so many people, man. I'm proud of you, man.
Well, I'm proud of you. I really appreciate that, brother. Thank you so much, and just appreciate you seeing some value and bringing me in to to share me with your audience. Because I know when you have an audience, people trust you, and they trust you and your team that you're going to bring in people that are going to bring value to their lives.
It's all about that.
And so I hope people have been able to pick something up from this conversation. And even if it's not relevant to you, I always tell people, even if it's not relevant to you right now, you still pick up some nuggets of this. You pick up some nuggets from this conversation or another conversation, and you still hold on to them because you don't know what the future entails. None of us do. And in 5 days, 5 months, 5 years, you may all of a sudden be like, ooh, I'm going through something, and I remember somebody saying something. What was I? Here it is. I got it. And it might help you at that point in your life. Other people are going through it right now, and they need every bit of this and any other conversation to help them through it right now. And just meet people where they are. No pressure, no expectation. Just show up as a person.
Yep.
And you'll be
Thank
all
you,
right.
brother.
It was a pleasure, my man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.